But what we're going to do is we're going to share the learnings from this, and we're going to be asking each of the facilitators to give us a summary of what happened in their group. They're going to be addressing 1, do we want treaty? 2, do we want treaty and the negotiations for treaty to include more than just the land councils and maybe some other independent bodies? And then what are the actions we need to get into with government, as well as some other key messages. So each of them will go through and give us about a 5 to 7 minute summary, and then we'll get into some questions. So we'll start with Jerome.
Thanks, Naomi. All right, I'll dive straight into it. So the room that I got to facilitate definitely wants to have a treaty. They think it's important, but what they would like to see is better use of, I guess, what is currently in existence out there. So we talked about the Treaty Commissioner's report that had been tabled. They want more opportunity for an engagement from the Office of the Treaty, or to see it fully and adequately funded, to be separate and independent again, and not sit in within the Office of Aboriginal Affairs within the Chief Minister's Department. They also talked about the need to have a dedicated male and female treaty commissioners that can continue to speak out, to be an independent voice, but also to allow that office to get out into the community more. Get out on the ground, talk to mob in their community, in their homes, sitting down on the dirt under the tree, and using simple, easy to understand language was really important. Because this needs to be owned by us, is what the group said. This can't be coming from government or from land councils. They want the community to own, what treaty looks like, but they want the support to ensure that mob on the ground understand what's happening in town, and have a real voice and an opportunity to engage. We talked about they do see a role for the land councils, as well as they talked about a dedicated Aboriginal dedicated office, and whether that's something that you talked about, Donna, it's separate statutory authority, or it's the Office of Treaty actually being independent and set up through that structure. But they see that there needs to be something other than not just the land councils. The old people have been asking for us to create a diplomatic space. So again, talked about, here we are again, talking about treaties, been talked about for decades, for generations. Let's actually get on and do it, and have young people involved. There was a real need to make sure that young people are there listening to the old people talk about what their old people told them when it came to treaty. So wanting to make sure that the next generation is involved in hearing the community leaders. There was a big discussion around truth-telling first as well. So what is the lessons that we can learn from the failed voice referendum to ensure that this doesn't fail again? So the need for truth-telling first to get the community to buy in, to understand, the non-Indigenous community, what this means, to have some compassion and understanding, and to bring a bit of unity and harmony, just because out there it feels just, like we're pulled against each other, with all the news cycle media of the day, just always talking about our issues and not our strengths. So the next steps, they want to come back, another opportunity to come back, but come with more informed opportunity to look at what's been done in the past, to look at what other states are doing in other jurisdictions here within our own country, as well as looking at, some other international models, what has been successful abroad and what has failed for them. So what can we learn from those lessons? And just more involvement from our Aboriginal community organisations that represent our communities as well. They want the anti-government to come forward and highlight what will be adapted from the Treaty Commissioner's report and what's not on the table. But in the same vein, what is it that the Commonwealth Government is going to bring to the table to enable treaty and the funding that's going to require for, some of the potential opportunities that fall out from it? So what is the Australian Government putting on the table? There was a great example given around what Yinga talked about. He talked about a dedicated body that focused on truth, treaty, and then scrutiny of the Northern Territory Government policy of the day, and making sure that we have an independent voice, calling out bad policy that could be harmful. So that's probably it in a bit of a nutshell.
Sorry. Thanks, Jerome. I think that was really powerful. I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of similar themes. Donna, do you want to tell us about what your group spoke to?
Yes, thanks. So we did. We had some parallel discussions, but I think to get started, the first question was, well, how's a treaty going to meet the closing the gap targets? And also in consideration of the failed referendum. So that kind of set the tone. And I think the trust issue came across quite strongly as well. And together with justice, there's such a need for that justice element, and education. We spoke. Participants spoke quite powerfully about education. Okay, so we have a treaty, and it was like the speaker earlier today, and I think that's what really inspired this discussion. We need to get it right across all the generations and education levels, and the concern was also, we have a small window of opportunity, and what happens with the upcoming election, and is all this work going to be wasted? But here's an opportunity. In the first place, we went around the room. We agreed. Yes, we support a treaty. Everyone supported a treaty. But it was those finer details, obviously, that needed to be addressed, which we spent the time doing. So one of the we talked about pillars, and so it would be around social justice and programs that work, and supporting our communities in the farthest reach areas of the Northern Territory, who pretty much are the voiceless. Communities and home outstations or homelands being left out of not just the conversation, but pretty much have been left for decades, to their own devices. So I that was a really important discussion, because if you can't flush the toilet, and if you can't have any communications because shelter doesn't reach there and all those sort of things. Like, this was a very different discussion to Alice Springs. I've got to point that out, because it was, and I thought, our discussion raised the fact that we can't overlook this. If we are going to be genuine in a treaty, we can't keep doing this. Can't send in government in there telling homelands what to do. And if you truly, really want to have a treaty that is Indigenous-led, place-based, so that led to a conversation about the treaty structure, an overarching treaty, and under which a whole number of treaties, as an option, functions. And then the concern also was, okay, so there's a big community over there with treaty getting access to big mobs of funding. So what happens to the ones that are sort of out of sight and out of mind? So the suggestion was that there needs to be, James brought up equity and equality. So relevant to those different particular groups or treaty nations. So we talked about options for a treaty, and returned to that discussion around, what sort of instrument of law in the territory is the most powerful, that so that with a different government, it doesn't just, get shut down. And that was the conversation around a statutory authority and having the relationship with the Commonwealth using the example of other statutory authorities that pretty much have to go through the process of Parliament in order to have any major changes, and it's not going to happen. So the strength in that. But to the side of that was a discussion about, well, how would it be funded? Because we've got all these aspirations to do X, Y, Z, all of those areas of deficit and disadvantage and aspirations and, empowerment. Well, how's it going to be funded? Well, then we had a discussion, albeit brief, but just being cognizant of that funding's got to come from somewhere. And as the Minister said earlier, that would be, a shared responsibility of the Territory and the Commonwealth if we were to have such a statutory authority. Now, an important part of that also is around language, to ensure that in this education piece, I'll call it a piece, that we're talking about understanding, informing, sharing, our bringing into, with respect to our elders past, and bringing in that knowledge and those messages from, 30, 40, 50 years ago about what they would want to see in a treaty. Well, they're the same principles as today. So
honouring the original Barunga Statement and the Larrakia Petition.
Yeah, the Carla petitions right through every generation. So education, we had a wonderful speaker on the education, Indigenous lady, who said that, we need to up the ante, pretty much my word, in curriculum developments. And another gentleman, he said, they're still being taught about the wrong, one-sided history. So in incorporating a history, our truth-telling into the history books, curriculum, there also needs to be an Indigenous perspective, but it's the teaching, the teachers and teaching that needs to be in line with that. So we feel that we can achieve this, but we have a window of opportunity.
That's now, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Donna. I think we'll unpack some more of that in the question segment. Hakon, how did your crew go with your young, vibrant, deadly young black flower presentation?
My group was actually very welcoming and transparent, but also very powerful with some of the messages that they brought forward.
He sounds deadly just talking like that.
By the way, that single and ready to mingle thing, that's been an ongoing gag for a while now.
And I'm going to say it every single time.
I thought I escaped that time, but no chance. A lot of common themes with the first two groups that have spoken, and I think probably there was a strong emphasis on the cost and the analysis and where does that money come from and how is it being funded. I also think that there was a lot of uncertainty around exchanging of the upcoming election and how does that look like in terms of if a new government does come in, will all the efforts just come to a halt, and a sort of who or where does the onus lie on? Around sort of the key themes that we spoke about, major ones were the legal and justice system, the education piece, and sort of that food security and accessibility for mob and community and bush mob. So I think that's a heavy influence, if anything, on what treaty means to my group. In terms of council and sort of what that governance structure looks like, we couldn't necessarily come to any agreements of sorts, but the ideas that were thrown out of who, if there were to be external parties other than the councils, does it look like the peak bodies of the NT, the Aboriginal peak bodies, or does it look like sort of traditional owners and down that cultural hierarchy of stolen generation and the visitors but who have lived on country for a long time type of thing, that piece.
And so they want treaty?
They want treaty. The consensus was treaty would be nice if done properly. If if we were to make all of our hopes and dreams come true, and follow through on sort of what we set out to do as mob, and sort of have that strong emphasis on this is for mob, so it should be run by mob, with little to no resistance from government, and sort of that trusting piece from government. I think treaty would go a long way.
Thank you very much, all three. I was also a facilitator, so I'm going to tell you my big paper stuff now from my deadly group. We had a very, I think we were in there for a really long time. We had a lot of really great contribution. Ultimately, in short form, our group said, yes, we want treaty. There are a lot of caveats to that, very similar to what the rest of the group has said. And yes to some level of independent representation outside of the land councils. That in terms of next steps, the very first next step is to garner what a mutual understanding of treaty is for all of us and for government, so that we're not all talking about different things. And I think that theme of language and language use came through really strongly in our group, and we kept talking about it, like down to why is it called a treaty symposium? What does symposium mean? And why couldn't we just say this is treaty talk or a treaty meeting? And why are we making it harder for our mob to be able to access that language when already they're speaking, their 5 or 6 languages, and English is not their first? And then they want to see more consultation, awareness, honesty from government. And I think that comes down to that piece around faith. What is the intention here? We had treaty on the table, then we had the referendum, and there was no treaty, and now we're back again. We've had local decision making, we've had other partnership agreements, and everybody keeps coming out and there's signing ceremonies, and the next chief minister's in the picture. Where's the faith for us that the government is going to follow through on that action? We want a community first and black principled approach to treaty when it happens, and it has to be coming from the community, and when we're talking about coming from the community, it means that the idea of how it looks and feels has to come from the grassroots and be fed up. And we talked about the notion of getting together in each of our communities, deciding what that looks like for us or what we would want before inviting government, land councils and everybody else to the table. The other question was around money. How are we going to fund the consultations and the awareness and the education and all of the things? And obviously we looked at everybody having to put some dollars in, local authorities, Northern Territory Government, Northern Territory Aboriginal Investment Corp, and there was a lot of talk about that money and how that money needs to benefit community, as well as the land councils paying, the PBCs and NIA. So there was a strong sort of agreement that we also have to have some skin in the game as Aboriginal people. We've got to be able to say, if government pays for everything, what are the strings that are going to be attached to that? So we've got to be able to contribute in some form or fashion, which was why we were talking about NTAC, because that's obviously territory monies and it's Aboriginal people's monies. So if we can use some of that money for the treaty process and the treaty conversations and the consultation, the strings aren't as tight and government doesn't decide, we do. So that Aboriginal-led piece, and got a couple more minutes. We had some conversations about digital, like viral sharing through using hashtags and TikTok and things that all of our young people know how to use to get everybody to understand what treaty is across different countries and across the territory. And we also had a conversation about a new constitution. So not talking about the Australian constitution, but an Aboriginal people's constitution. Obviously, the legislative requirements around treaty are really difficult, so there were a lot of conversations there. We had somebody studying law talking to this in our group, a lot of reference to UNDRIP, but also a lot of reference to the last time somebody came and talked to us about treaty in our community was 30 years ago, So how come it's taken so long for this to come back to community, and then who is coming out next to talk to us, and the question about what happens after this. So government, you brought us here to talk about treaty. What's going to happen next? and we can do all the talking, but what are the actions? I'll go through the other really important bits in a little while, but it's probably good if we go out to questions and people can talk a little bit more about their feelings around what was happening in their groups. Do you want me to kick off, or are you really keen to get involved? I think it'd be really great if we had some questions from the floor. Anybody ready? Yep. Tony Jack, Borroloola.
Everyone, Tony here from Borroloola, Robertson River, Garramilla. I was there last week, Alice Spring, one of the delegates. And saying I heard about the consult process. A lot of people missed out on that, including me here, my community area. So straight away, we got left behind. This is the way forward we're going to go. So we learned from that. If we're going to go forward from here, let's be fair income. We picked this up in our discussion there earlier, our group, with Naomi there. But people want to be involved, they want to, have input, get into discussion. We were waiting. When is treaty mob coming? Mick Dodson was there then, that early days. Waiting, nothing. So we got left behind. If we want to go forward, people want to get involved, have ownership. And we've captured that in our discussion there. So I want to the panel and everybody here, send a message from this forum out. There's no time frame. The consultation has to be done properly. We heard people talked about it earlier today, and from our Alice Spring meeting saying, that's the reason why I'm here sitting there today to tell you about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think, Jerome, how important do you feel it is? So, Tony, we talked a lot about that, and so did our group. Don't rush consultation just to get something happening, even though, we often talk about, in the business world, we talk about we've got to get speed to market, we've got to accelerate, we've got to hurry up. How important is it that we take our time to get this right?
Yeah, it's incredibly important what Tony is talking about. Our mob talked about, the empowerment needs to be returned to community. This needs to be community, grass-led, driven. And one other piece, we talked about that I neglected to quickly touch on was the fact that our communities are so over-consultated by government as well, constantly coming in and out and distracting community from their own day-to-day, jobs that they're trying to come good on. And where's the accountability from within the government to slow that down and make sure mob are being consulted, but it's going across all departments and not that another department coming back. So it's really incredibly important to make sure there's genuine buy-in, ownership, and willingness to participate from community. Again, we heard restorative justice. We heard to be able to create a political space to be able to solve issues, and no one being above one another was really important when the opportunity comes out to consult with community. And again, making sure that our young people are involved, our young leaders are there listening to our elders and making sure that knowledge is being passed on. Absolutely.
Donna, in my group, they also talked about how important bilingual approaches to this consultation are and the importance of interpreters, and reflecting on that, the importance for Balanda, Perakot, Gardia, Miglu, whatever you want to call them, whitefellas, to learn language so they can communicate too. So we're out there learning that way, and there's a need for Balandas to learn our way. How important is that to accountability for government? Because we had a lovely lady in our session ask a question about accountability. So, we're knowing we've got to go slow, but what about accountability? How does the government demonstrate accountability?
Accountability pretty much was an important, part of our discussion, even though it wasn't specifically said. But it was well, how do we engage with community and give them the opportunity to understand, what this treaty is about, but how, pretty much back to empowerment, how to empower our people to participate in policies and programs affecting our communities. How does that translate into so many diverse languages? And not only that, that generation, so that our elders are understanding, as well as, those who are old enough to understand. So we're not looking at the littlies. But accountability. Okay, so you get to the point where you've got policies and things in place, but then how do we hold the government accountable, or how do we hold the process accountable? How do we measure, like what we've achieved? Because there's so much disappointment in the coalition of peaks and closing the gap and all the rest of it. How is this going to be different? So that's an important educational piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the conversations, obviously we've heard about the peaks and how important they are to this conversation as the independent. One of the parts of the conversation from our group was that the peaks are really important, but they also have to remember who they represent. And often the peaks get caught up in their own little journey. I'm in a peak too, but, playing missionary, mercenary and madman, and they're forgetting who they're representing. So our peaks need to get back to core business so that we can have that conversation really well. And in terms of accountability, we were, I was a little bit mean and had a bit of a laugh. They were saying, how will we hold government accountable to their promises? I said, that's it, just stop them. Permits, no permits, can't come country, can't go fishing, can't do nothing. This is our land, no more. And, if you have to get to that point, that's something that's a tool that we have to negotiate with, but I'm a radical and I'm militant and I'm bitter, so that's okay. But other questions? Everybody tired, eh? That was a hard session. No, Tony, Jack, you already had a go. Gavin, you can have another go if you... Anybody else? There, look. Here, look. Tony Jack got that country hat on. That's what I was saying in Alice Springs. He knows blackfellas like country music, and if you don't like country music, you can leave. Uncle Charlie was my godfather.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel, and thanks for everybody for being here. My name is Larry. I'm from Queensland, Cape York, Torres Strait, okay? And I'm a university student in Chelsea. I, for one, I live experience through the hardship, and I was only 1 year of age when the referendum was coming. But, I'm into this constitution. It's really rippled me, because that governs this country of Australia. It's westernized system that came here, in the stroke of a pen in 1901. So a few white fellows that did that in New South Wales. And, we've got to look at Plan B, a backup. And there's nothing stopping us utilising the leverage of Australia under the treaty, signatory to the United Nations human rights, our indigenous rights of this country. Now, that must be utilised in some way as a leverage if we can't get the government to support us on that level. I mean, yes, we got defeated with the Yes campaign, but hey, let's give this treaty a try and just utilise what we can achieve by utilising what's over in international forum. I for one want to see Australia be held accountable for the atrocity and genocide they did since the colonisation of this country. Africa is doing that. The Brazil are doing that. So, let's go hard on this. It's not going to go soft and be kicking the guts and laying down. And what I want to see is the treaty goes through and get the younger ones involved first and foremost. because they are going to be the next journey. They're the ones that are going to be the leaders. And that's for building the capacity. Let's do it from the grassroots level and bring in every indigenous walk of life from the community as far and wide to bring together, because people build it. Power sits with the people, not with individual organizations that are stipulated by the government. So this is a message that I want to see go through for the younger generation. You know, we don't want to wait for another 20 odd years and do a treaty then.
No.
It starts here after we left the school.
Thank you, Larry. And Hakon, on that, talking about the younger generation, how do you see young people being involved in this movement? How will we activate our young people?
During my discussion in my breakout, I put it back onto my group and sort of pushed back and said, like, that this treaty is not going to be an overnight solution, that we're constantly having these battles and we're constantly going through the motions. And so it's sort of coming up to that, the question on what does your succession plan look like as leaders from community, as leaders in power, and how do you plan to bring mob along and pass on knowledge? So I talked from my perspective and said that I'm very lucky and grateful to be here and be able to be listening to these conversations and speaking to the people that I get to speak to on a regular basis. But I think there's got to be a more stronger emphasis on those that are capable in bringing along young mob should do that more often. We should be encouraging dinner table conversations around sort of those hard topics. We should be encouraging just making, I guess, those hard conversations more of a norm, I think, because I'm lucky and blessed to be from a family of strong women who constantly are bringing me to events, are getting me involved in what I think and what I think the landscape looks like moving forward. So I would encourage everyone who's able to do that and who can do that to bring in young mob and sort of get their opinion, sort of ask from what things look like from their perspective, what do the projections in the future look like, and sort of just from that, building that capacity up, building that confidence up, and sort of around, like, there's a lot of young mob that we know who battle with shame job, who battle with that imposter syndrome, but having people to back them regularly, or having people to tell them that they believe in them and show and bring them onto those conversations and give them a seat at the table goes very far with our young mob.
Thanks, Hakon. I'm just filming for his mother. Did anybody else have anything to add about young people? Hey, look, microphone, auntie.
Yes, following on from that, thanks. Yes, youth were a bit concerned. When we look at our youth in the territory, I don't know what the numbers are, but assuming that we have a high population of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth, one of the really important points that was raised was what is happening, what's going to be done about the health and well-being of our people, but our youth. And we had that discussion around, it came out of that education piece as well, where our youth, a lot of them, including my own family, suffer from high, well, I'm not saying literacy and numeracy, but dyslexia. My son is a classic case in point, the high spectrum of dyslexia. But there is not an isolated case. A lot of our children are, and I don't know how he managed to get, to be an adult, because it creates this anxiety and anger, and trying to find your place in a system that does not take, is not considerate of some of those specific health issues that this education system provides. So our children with otitis media, for example, hearing disorders, but problems, is in our family as well, but also Tourette's and that other one, which I can't think of, but my grandson suffers with. Anyway, autism. Right, so what I'm saying is that we're concerned about the youth, and we have these aspirations or expectations that they will follow into some leadership role at some point, but we do need to have more support around that, and we need to have support around our parents and our elders who are, providing that, and support groups who can provide that kind of care and mentoring for our youth. So that was a big, that was a good conversation, but also pointed out some things that we didn't discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our group also said that in the consultations we need to be sure to make it accessible to people with differing abilities and for neurodiversity. So, I think something to think about when we're dealing not just with young people but with all of our people. We've got maybe 10 minutes to go. Do we have any more questions from the crowd? If we don't, I'll get these guys to wrap up some thoughts.
Hi, there was a lot of interest in our group just around where this information will go after today. And I'm sure it's been brought up many times, but I think we're really after an answer because the understanding is there's no independent commission currently. So Tony's no longer engaged as a commissioner. Will this information from today be owned by the agency? Does it go to the Labor government? Will NTIBN package it up and hold it somewhere, or whoever's been engaged to do it? There was lots of thoughts around that, not just what's going to be done with it in terms of decision making, but who will have access to it, who owns it.
Yeah, thanks, Jade. I'll have a crack at this one. This is the Northern Territory Government Forum. Jerome and Hakon are here filling spots as facilitators outside of NTIBN, and I've been engaged through my business Salt Black, so it's Northern Territory Government agenda. What I understand is that they're going to consider and represent the views back to the Northern Territory Treaty Working Group, which is the land councils at this stage, correct, Rob? And then they're going to publish a report on the symposium outcomes, which provide a more detailed summary of the views and opinions. So there's going to be a report that's going to be published. So we had that conversation too. What happens after this? Where will the information go? Obviously, a lot of it's captured. All of the rooms that had the breakouts were recorded and hand-cited, or whatever you call that stuff, flash stuff. So that'll all go into the report as well, and I assume that report will be made public. Probably. Rob, who's the Director of Treaty, might answer that question.
Yes, thanks. So the information will be collated by the Department of the Chief Minister and Cabinet, so the Treaty Unit in the Office of Aboriginal Affairs. A report will be produced and provided to the Minister for his consideration. And the hopes is that information will be, well, not the hope, the aim is that information will be used to inform discussions with the land councils around re-establishing the treaty working group and the negotiation of that MOU the Minister spoke about earlier today.
Yeah.
So the information will be held by the Northern Territory Government, and when the Northern Territory Government holds information, it's held subject to the Information Act and can't be released to anyone without permission.
Tony Jack.
I was going to just talk, we've got an election coming up here, August, isn't it? No. So everybody will be coming around. When you go home there, when you go back to your business, go back to your organization, I think they got 2 more sittings left, isn't it?
6, eh? 6?
Then they go to caretaker or something, ready for election. So this is where you put the hard question, nah?
Yeah.
When they go through, go through the list, check this or that there. Here, treaty, what you going to do for treaty? That's all, I'll just leave that message there. Thanks everybody, thank you.
No, thank you, Tony. I think that's really important.
We want treaty now.
Yeah, we need the song to come on right now. Would be perfect. I'm just gonna give the panel just 2 minutes each. If there's any other important points that you want to make that came out of your group or any message before I go to the final wrap up. Jerome.
No, the biggest thing was, we've had the Treaty Commission report tabled with the Territory Government for over 2 years. Let's actually implement it. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out there and understand, what will be implemented and what won't be. And let's fund it adequately and make it independent and sit out independent of government and actually appoint, the Treaty Commissioners again, male and female, independent, can be a strong voice for our mob and continue to call out the inaction from government.
Let's not lose all that wisdom from our elders who started this whole treaty, demand for a treaty, call for a treaty, and let's make sure that the voices of the farthest to reach communities are also incorporated in this. And we need a treaty now.
Yeah, I think my point would just be, if we're going to do it, let's do it properly. Let's educate everyone. Let's get out to the communities. Let's speak about this more robustly. Let's have these ongoing conversations, and let's lead the charge.
Fantastic. And one last message from my group before I go into the sum up and we thank the panel is to remember that we are professionals from country. We're the anthropologists of country, we're the lawyers of country, we're the teachers and the leaders of country, and nobody else can take that away. So our degrees come from country and culture. And when we're working through treaty, we need to remember that we're the professionals in that space. We know culture, we know country, we know the way forward, and we know the principles. So let's get tough together on that and get ready. So let's thank the panel, the final panel, and thank yourselves too for all your contributions. Don't slip over on that paper. Leave it there though, that's all right. We're going to finish up now. I know it's been a really long day, and there's a lot to think about, including, some of those really important questions around what happens next, like Jade asked around the information, where it goes and who gets to hold it. But also with the August election coming up, I think it's really important that we have the important conversations collectively as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Territory. I want our land councils to be really strong for us and to remember to see those of us who maybe aren't represented by the land council, see us too, and speak really strong for us in those conversations with government. I think moving forward and thinking about what that election looks like, Duran said today, it's important to ask the questions of your members. When they come to visit you, ask the question, get informed, see what they're talking about, and whether they're from the current government or the opposition, whoever they are, they've got to be able to talk to those things. We are a mighty, mighty group of people when we are together. We're 37% of the population, with a school population going on to 50%, the largest ethnic group. They need our vote. They need our vote. And this is your country. This is your country. I would say it's mine, but it's not. I just live here. But I love this place and I will die here fighting for this earth. And so collectively, let's remember those really important words before we go home today. That this land was never given up. This land was never bought and sold. The planting of the Union Jack never changed our law at all. It never changed our law. L-O-R-E, law. Now 2 rivers run their course, separated for so long. I'm dreaming of a brighter day when the waters will be one. Treaty yeah, treaty now. Treaty now. The process has to start and we have to own it. I'm so proud of everybody who gave their heart and soul into those conversations today. There were very, very brave people who said some really hard things. Let's activate as a community. Land Council leaders, please, talk to all of us about it. We all want to be involved. Those of you who are community leaders, let's get our young people involved. Somewhere along the line, we're going to have to pick our bulldogs who will come together to organise. I know we're tired after the referendum, but we're ready for the fight again, hey? Have a good day. Go home, talk to your family about treaty. See you later.